It is such a pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to wear a different hat tonight and be a speaker and really have a chance to talk a little bit about one of our exciting new exhibitions, Marilyn Monroe. I want to just echo the words of thanks that Harry provided, to thank all of you for being here, thank those of you who are members for your member support. We're so grateful to South Magazine for really partnering with us on this to help get the word out and do an incredible job of promotion. And I also wanted to thank my wonderful staff who really did the heavy lifting in putting the exhibition together, from the installation crew, organizing, hanging all the work, our PR team, our education team. So many people do so much work behind the scenes, and so thank you to all of them for making this possible. So now we're going to have a little fun tonight and talk about Marilyn Monroe. So in the film Some Like It Hot, Marilyn Monroe's character complains that she's always getting the fuzzy end of the lollipop. And the iconic starlet herself similarly went through life with the stinging perception that Hollywood gave her the short shrift, never accepting her as a serious actress. The art world, however, has always taken her seriously, as a beauty, as a muse, and as a symbol. From Andy Warhol to Cindy Sherman, artists have made the 50s actress an indelible part of American art history, with her image and the way her image has entered the visual culture, influencing photographers and street artists alike. Two of the most iconic images of the 20th century feature Marilyn Monroe. Bruno Bernard's photograph Marilyn in White of Monroe in her windblown dress from the movie The 7-Year Itch was recently selected as the symbol of the century by the Museum of Modern Art, New York. Can't get much better than that, can you? And Andy Warhol's Marilyn, which was created just months after her death in 1962, is arguably one of, if not the best recognized, most recognized piece of modern art. So what is it about Marilyn Monroe that makes her such an enduring legacy in American culture? In the decades following her death, she has often been cited as both a pop and a cultural icon, as well as the quintessential American sex symbol. We're delighted to open our new exhibition tonight that celebrates this true American icon, Marilyn Monroe. The show was originally created in 2012 to coincide with the 50th anniversary of her death. Whoops. There, let me take that back. And it has been traveling around the world to great acclaim. The exhibition is divided into two main sections, and my comments tonight will follow the same structure. First, I will tell the story of Marilyn Monroe's brief career through the images taken of her during her lifetime by some of the top photographers of the time. And then I'll explore Marilyn's role as a muse for artists, fashion designers, celebrities, and popular culture in general over the 50 years since her death. So now, from Norma Jean to Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe was born June 1st, 1926, as Norma Jean Mortensen. Coming from humble beginnings, she was baptized Norma Jean Baker and spent much of her childhood in orphanages and foster homes. At age 19, she was working for $35 a week at the Radio Plane Factory in Burbank when she caught the eye of David Conover, a photographer in the U.S. Army Air Force's 1st Motion Picture Unit. Interestingly, his commanding officer, who happened to be future U.S. President Ronald Reagan, sent him to the factory in 1944, where he first met and photographed Norma Jean. She soon signed on with a modeling agency, and her first job was in 1945 with photographer André Didion, who was looking for a model to do artistic nude shots. Norma Jean had recently separated from her first husband, James Doherty, and told Deans of her wish to become an actress. Dean suggested they go on a road trip to photograph her in the natural landscapes, for which Dean paid her a flat fee of $200. The image on the left is from this photo shoot. Norma Jean became one of Blue Book's most successful models. She appeared on dozens of magazine covers. Her successful modeling career brought her to the attention of a 20th Century Fox exec who offered her a standard 6-month contract with a starting salary of $125 a week. By the end of 1946, her hair had become a platinum shade of blonde, and her name was changed to Marilyn Monroe. The image on the right was taken by German-American photographer Bruno Bernard, also known as Bernard of Hollywood, in 1947. Here, the new blonde Marilyn Monroe, sorry, I must have this on a timer, The new blonde Marilyn Monroe appears in a blue bathing suit at the Racquet Club in Palm Springs, California. Bernard is also known for discovering Marilyn Monroe. Years later, Monroe is said to have told him, "Remember, Bernie, you started it all." Despite her contract at 20th Century Fox, however, Monroe had very few speaking roles. And when offers didn't come, she returned to modeling to pay the bills. And here is a really fun image I found while I was looking for some of her early modeling work. I thought you all would enjoy. Maybe some of you in the crowd recognize what she's wearing. She's wearing a Georgia Tech sweater. She appeared on the cover of Look magazine wearing this Georgia Tech sweater as part of an article celebrating female enrollment on the school's main campus. So just a little fun for the local crowd here. But now, while she resisted nude modeling jobs initially, desperate times called for desperate measures. In 1949, at the age of 22, Marilyn Monroe caught the eye of photographer Tom Kelly, who convinced her to pose nude. Monroe was laid out on a large fabric of red silk, almost like a specimen, and the actress was paid $50 for her work. Took a little over 2 hours. The series has come to be very famous and known as the Red Velvet photographs. The photographs were not actually published until 1952, when the two of them appeared anonymously on a Golden Dreams calendar, which hung proudly in auto repair shops around the country. You see that around the left. This one I found, there's tons of these online, and this is from Hollywood Spring and Axle. It caused a bit of a scandal for Marilyn, although she had done it anonymously. When reporters put two and two together and discovered that she looked an awful lot, the girl in the Golden Dreams calendar looked an awful lot like their new young 20th Century Fox starlet, the studio first tried to deny it. But Marilyn faced the scandal straight on, admitting frankly that she had posed nude because, quote, "I was broke and needed the rent money." This disarming, a girl's gotta eat defense was a shrewd PR move on her part, and her career blossomed. Interestingly, a shrewd young Hugh Hefner borrowed money in 1953 to purchase the negatives to use for the centerfold of the very first issue of Playboy, which debuted in December 1953, with Marilyn on the cover. So Marilyn was the first Playmate of the month. Isn't that interesting? I didn't realize that. The heavy promotion centered around Marilyn's nudity on the already famous calendar, together with tease marketing, made the new Playboy magazine a soaring success. The publicity also helped propel Monroe into the world of Hollywood stardom. She had recently won a Best Picture award for her performance in All About Eve, so she had definitely made the big time by now. And as with any major star, she had a group of photographers that followed her everywhere, snapping photos at every chance they could get. In fact, some say she is the most photographed person ever. Unlike other stars, however, Monroe's horde of shutterbug groupies included the famous names of many 20th century photographers. So, photographers prefer Marilyn. One of these was noted Life magazine photographer Alfred Eisenstaedt, considered the father of photojournalism. After fleeing Nazi Germany, Eisenstaedt worked as a photojournalist for Life magazine from 1936 to 1972. Candid images of his subjects were his signature. Eisenstaedt is best known for capturing this iconic image of VJ Day in Times Square on August 14, 1945. When Eisenstaedt photographed Marilyn Monroe at her Hollywood home in 1953, the 54-year-old German-born photographer had been a professional photographer for 3 decades. And the 26-year-old actress was indisputably a star on the rise. The images Eisenstaedt captured on that afternoon remain not only among the warmest, most casually intimate photos of Marilyn that anyone ever made, they also serve as a poignant record of a young woman on the very cusp of both genuine superstardom and years of gradually ever-deepening misery. So now we'll get on to the photo that MoMA named the symbol of the century, that subway dress photo. For the 1955 movie, The 7-Year Itch, Marilyn Monroe appeared in one of the most famous photographic stunts in the history of film. The studio used the photographs to advertise the film, and it has become one of the most iconic images, not only of Marilyn Monroe, but really in American pop culture. The scene for the movie was to be shot on the corner of Lexington Avenue and 52nd Street at 1 o'clock in the morning. The publicity department for the film leaked the time and place of the shoot, and by the time it was to begin, several hundred photographers and onlookers were on the scene jostling for position. The technicians below the grate operated the fans in such a way as to give everyone in the crowd revealing views of Marilyn's legs and white panties. 2 pair of panties to be exact, as one pair was deemed to be too see-through. Because there were dozens of photographers at the shoot, there are many, many different versions of this iconic photograph. Just going back one, you see sort of 3 versions. So when someone says, what's the version? There's really so many because there were hundreds of photographers who were there. But despite it being one of the most recognizable photographs of Monroe, the famous full-length image of the actress with her dress being blown never actually appeared in the film. The shots used in the film are of her legs, cut with reaction shots, never showing the full-length view that has become an iconic image in pop culture. Interestingly, the iconic dress that she wore, was designed by Travilla, who was a costume designer for theater, film, and television, and he dressed Marilyn Monroe in 8 of her films. The dress was later purchased by Debbie Reynolds and was sold in 2011 for $4.6 million. I don't know what the price per square inch of fabric is, but that's a lot. So in addition, the dress really achieved iconic status on its own. Here's Barbie, Subway Barbie, Britney Spears, I feel channeling the subway dress in this image. Of course, we have our own version in City Market, and even Marge Simpson. I love that. But the biggest repercussion for the subway dress shoot was the reaction of Marilyn's husband, Joe DiMaggio. Their marriage was only 9 months old at the time and was already in trouble. Joe arrived after the shoot had begun, and the sight of several hundred people taking pictures and ogling his wife during the whole scene was just too much for him to take. They officially separated 2 weeks after the subway photo and filed for divorce in October that year, just 274 days after their elopement. Marilyn Monroe's 3 marriages were intensely documented by the press. This photo captures the moment when Monroe stepped out of her house in Beverly Hills to meet the press to announce she was seeking a divorce from DiMaggio on grounds of mental cruelty. Taken by George Silk, a longtime Life magazine photographer and World War II combat photographer, it shows a painful moment for Monroe. Despite their divorce, DiMaggio and Monroe were able to form a close and lasting bond that endured beyond Marilyn's death. It was DiMaggio who made her funeral arrangements and saw to it that a red rose be placed on her grave every day, even after his death. I think, you're so used to seeing iconic happy pictures of her. This is a really painful one, I think. It was around this time that Marilyn met and befriended the famous fashion photographer Milton H. Greene. Greene's rural Weston, Connecticut farmhouse became a refuge for Monroe, where she was able to escape the spotlight following her divorce. Greene photographed Monroe in more than 50 photographic sessions during their time together. While many photographers tried to emphasize her sexy image, Greene presented her in more modest poses, and she was pleased with this work. Greene also acted as a friend and business advisor to her. She confided in him her frustration with her 20th Century Fox contract and the roles she was offered and what she was paid. Her salary for Gentlemen Prefer Blondes amounted to $18,000, while freelancer Jane Russell was paid more than $100,000. And she said, "I'm the blonde in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes." Greene agreed that she could earn more money by breaking away from 20th Century Fox, and together they formed her own film production company, giving her more control over her career. After abandoning her contract with 20th Century Fox, Marilyn left Hollywood for New York to take acting lessons with Lee Strasberg. In New York, Marilyn largely evaded publicity. Dressed down in casual clothes and no makeup, she wandered the city unnoticed, which must have been such a wonderful feeling for her. But by March of 1955, Greene and Marilyn agreed that her image needed a boost. Her wish to prove herself as a serious actress had been roundly mocked by the press. They arranged for a cover spread for the July 1955 Red Book with the story, "The Marilyn Monroe You've Never Seen." For one hectic week, New York photographer Ed Feingersh observed 29-year-old Monroe during her private and public life in New York, following her as she wandered around the city and took an incognito jaunt on the subway. Here's one image from him, and this is another from that same series. He captured a beautiful Monroe oscillating between new self-confidence and extreme vulnerability, who could be relaxed and joyful one moment, contemplative, dreamy, and sad the next. His grainy, monochromatic shots of Monroe were among the most realistic ever taken of the star and stand in stark contrast to the glamour photos from Hollywood. This is another one by Ed Feingersh from the same series, and though it seems a little more glamorous, it's really her getting ready to go out to an event in New York. It's her in her hotel room. But it shows a playful Monroe splashing, putting the finishing touches on her evening with a splash of Chanel No. 5. Of course, Marilyn had a great answer when asked what she wore in bed. She replied flirtingly, "Why, Chanel No. 5, of course." Always a good line, playing for the press. After having met at a party, Marilyn Monroe approached photographer Eve Arnold about working together. Arnold, who was Magnum Photo's first female photographer, is regarded as one of the leaders of post-war photojournalism. Her many honors include the Order of the British Empire and the Lifetime Achievement Award of the American Society of Magazine Photographers. She was a fellow of the Royal Photographic Society and named a master photographer by the International Center of Photography in New York, considered by many to be the world's most prestigious photographic honor. Acclaimed for capturing celebrities in intimate moments after winning their trust, Eve Arnold developed a particular rapport with Monroe, and the two shared 6 photo sessions and remained friends until the starlet's death. This candid photo, taken in 1955, is one of the few in which Marilyn seems truly able to let her guard down and relax. Some have commented and wondered if it's because it was a woman photographer, if maybe there was, just changed the dynamics of the relationship enough where Marilyn could relax. This is a photograph by Cecil Beaton, who was another famous English photographer who captured Marilyn on film. Beaton made this series of luminescent, delicate, beautiful photographs of Monroe one February afternoon in 1956. Most notably, he is credited with taking Monroe's favorite picture of herself, holding a red flower. Now, this image is much more staged and theatrical. Just by contrast, you see the Eve Arnold before, sort of a candid type of shot, and Cecil Beaton's is much more theatrical and staged. And he was really famous for that kind of work. He was the one who took the pictures of the wedding of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, and he was also one of Britain's leading war photographers, best known for his images of the damage done by the German Blitz. But he wasn't necessarily one in combat. These were the kinds of images he would take during the war. And during his assignment, he captured one of the most enduring images of British suffering during the war, which was this really important photograph of a 3-year-old Blitz victim recovering in a hospital, clutching her beloved teddy bear. When this image was published, America had not yet officially joined the war. But when this image was splashed across the press in the United States, it really helped push the American public to put pressure on their government to help Britain in its hour of need. So it's a real example of sort of the power of an image to, change the course of history. In 1957, while still in New York, Marilyn Monroe sat for Richard Avedon in his studio on Madison Avenue. She could still step into the breathy blonde persona. As Avedon said, for hours she danced and sang and flirted and did this thing she did Marilyn Monroe, adding that a little white wine helped things along. But then he went on and said, then there was the inevitable drop. She sat in the corner like a child, with everything gone. And he clicked his shutter once more. He said, I wouldn't photograph her without her knowledge of it. And as I came with the camera, I saw that she was not saying no. This resulting final frame is among the most famous portraits ever made. Marilyn returned to Hollywood in August 1958 to star in Some Like It Hot. This film became a resounding success and was nominated for 6 Academy Awards. Monroe was acclaimed for her performance and won the Golden Globe Award for Best Actress, Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy. But despite her box office success, a great loneliness can be felt in many of Marilyn Monroe's photographs from the era. Her inner light and radiance was often just a facade constructed for the public eye, and her inner mood was frequently dark. A glimpse of this internal melancholy can be seen in this 1960 photograph by the famous French photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson, taken on the set of The Misfits, Monroe's final film, and an ill-fated collaboration with her third husband, playwright Arthur Miller. Instead of her usual toothy, ecstatic presence, the actress seems contemplative, at times even confused. Now, Cartier-Bresson is one of the most original, accomplished, influential, and beloved figures in the history of photography. Just a sampling of some of his iconic work. His inventive work in the 1930s helped define the creative potential of modern photography, and his uncanny ability to capture life on the run made his work synonymous with the decisive moment. After World War II, most of which he spent as a prisoner of war, and his first museum show, which was at the Museum of Modern Art in 1947, he co-founded the Magnum Photo Agency, which enabled photojournalists to reach a broad audience through magazines such as Life magazine, while still retaining control over their work. Over his long career, Cartier-Bresson was a keen observer of human affairs and considered one of the greatest portraitists of the 20th century. And it was wonderful. His work was the subject of a major retrospective at MoMA in 2010. Another important photographer, Ernst Hawes, also captured Marilyn on the scene of the Misfits. During his 40-year career, Ernst Hawes bridged the gap between photojournalism and the use of photography as a medium for expression and creativity. He was a pioneer of color photography, and he described himself as a painter in a hurry. His work was the subject of the first single artist exhibition of color photography at New York's Museum of Modern Art in 1962. He was equally adept at black and white, and in 1960 captured the cast and crew on the set of The Misfits. These photographs remain among his best-known work. At the beginning of the 1960s, Monroe was at the peak of her fame. She had just starred in Some Like It Hot. Only 3 years later, the tabloid magazines were flooded with rumors that she had trysted with the president, John F. Kennedy. By then, photographers had begun to capitalize on the blazing potential of Monroe's sexuality, particularly photographer Bert Stern, who famously photographed Monroe in the nude for a 1962 fashion spread in Vogue. Stern was a commercial photographer associated with the golden age of advertising, sort of the Mad Men era. He was part of a generation of photographers who made clear, clutter-free, arresting images the language of glossy magazine advertising. In the summer of '62, Stern took more than 2,500 photographs of Marilyn Monroe that have collectively come to be known as The Last Sitting. Taken over 3 days at the Hotel Bel Air, the photographs are arguably the most famous images ever captured of America's most famous actress. Divorced from Arthur Miller and recently fired from the set of the aptly named film Something's Gotta Give, Monroe is physically revealing. There are nude studies in which she's barely covered by a chiffon scarf, but seems emotionally exhausted. Stern captures her in a sometimes pensive but mostly playful mood as she posed nude, variously covered by bed sheets, a stripy scarf, and a pair of chiffon roses. Despite their air of carefree humor, the portraits are inescapably wistful because they are among the last photographs taken of the star. Just 6 weeks later, on August 5, 1962, Monroe died of a drug overdose at the young age of 36. Stern's photos are prized today for the honest depictions of Monroe's almost desperate vivaciousness and overripe glamour in the last weeks of her life. Lee Strasberg, her acting teacher, delivered the eulogy at Marilyn's funeral. He said, "In her eyes and in mine, her career was just beginning. She had a luminous quality, a combination of wistfulness, radiance, and yearning that set her apart and made everyone wish to be a part of it, to share childish naivete, which was at once so shy and yet so vibrant." So now we're going to shift gears a little bit and explore Marilyn's influence on artists in the 50 years since her death, starting, of course, with another American icon, Andy Warhol, who gave her much more than her 15 minutes of fame. In August 1962, on the occasion of Marilyn Monroe's tragic death, Andy Warhol began work on one of the most iconic images in modern art, his Marilyn screen prints. Warhol found in Monroe a fusion of two of his consistent themes, death and the cult of celebrity. His silkscreen prints are among the most well-known images of Monroe to have ever been produced. Interestingly, Monroe's death occurred in the exact same month that Warhol had first begun experimenting with silkscreen as a medium. Here's Warhol's story in his own words. "In August '62, I started doing silkscreens. I wanted something stronger that gave more of an assembly line effect. With silk screening, you pick a photograph, blow it up, transfer it in glue onto silk, and then roll ink across it so the ink goes through the silk but not through the glue. That way, you get the same image, slightly different each time. It was all so simple, quick, and chancy. I was thrilled with it. When Marilyn Monroe happened to die that month, I got the idea to make screens of her beautiful face. This idea was one that would change art history, as Andy Warhol cast America's beloved blonde bombshell in perhaps her most lasting role as artistic muse. Warhol based this portrait on a publicity shot of Monroe, you see here, from the 1953 film Niagara, ironically the star's only film in which her character dies. Here you see the original image alongside Warhol's cropping of it. Warhol took this studio portrait and flattened it into endlessly repeated silkscreen prints, replicating the half-closed eyes, the parted lips, and the famous beauty mark. Silk screening is a process that degrades the image each time it is duplicated, offering a parallel to Marilyn's own degradation. Warhol's portraits, made in the aftermath of her death, test the lasting power of Marilyn's visage, while also questioning the way the Hollywood culture of commodification and image creation may have contributed to her sad fate. Print after print, face after face, Warhol asserts the reproducibility of the fallen star and the oh-so-fleeting nature of Hollywood's embrace. I think this can be seen particularly in this Marilyn diptych that's at the Tate, London. I wanted to call your attention to this particular Marilyn, which is known as the turquoise Marilyn, just for sort of, cocktail party stories. This is the second most expensive Warhol work ever purchased, I guess ever sold and purchased, depending on which side of the table you were on. In May 2007, it sold for $80 million, second only to the $100 million price paid for Warhol's 8 Elvises. This turquoise Marilyn was purchased by a hedge fund manager through a private sale with Larry Gagosian, and Warhol, who died in 1987, continues to be the second most actively traded artist, second only to Pablo Picasso. So, as pop art was phased out, minimalism and conceptual art came in the 1970s, and the obsessive art making about Monroe briefly went out of style. It's hard to make Monroe in a minimalist way, I guess. However, as all things are cyclical, it was only inevitable that depictions of Monroe would return to vogue among a younger generation of artists from around the world, working mostly in the 1990s and early decades of the 21st century. However, in the circuitous spirit of art history, what's interesting is these images often refer not really to Marilyn herself, but they refer to Warhol's images of Marilyn, or to the early photographers' images of Marilyn. And many of them also have a much darker edge to them, referencing the tragic figure of Marilyn. As you see here, in this series by Austrian artist Heidi Popovic, which is actually a pseudonym for a contemporary artist named Christian Polzer. The name of this artist suggests the artist's love of ambiguity, as it's an amalgam of nature-loving Swiss star Heidi and Woody Allen's neurotic psychoanalyst Dr. Nikita Popovic. But in this series of work, Popovic creates a new version of Marilyn Monroe in response to the highly exposed and recognizable Warhol silkscreens, continuing the intersection of celebrity and death that fascinated Warhol. A digitally rendered image of the starlet as a skeleton alters the iconic portrait and references her tragic fate. And again, you see, he's reacting to Warhol, who was reacting to Marilyn, so you get this sort of cycle. Other contemporary artists, like Brazilian artist Vik Muniz, take a lighter tack. Here we see an artist using the same image, but here he recreates it using his own signature materials, chocolate syrup on the left and diamond dust on the right. I don't know if you're familiar with Vik Muniz's work, but he creates these things. Literally, it's chocolate syrup drawn, and then he takes photos of it. It's pretty interesting. But, while it sort of seems light, I was thinking that the choice of media could perhaps reference Marilyn's status as an object of consumption and desire. Chocolate, diamonds, this sense of decadence. Then, of course, we have street artists like Banksy riffing on this, going out, replacing the face of Marilyn with Kate Moss. There are images of Michael Jackson, name your star, cut and paste, put them in, but it's just this template exists. And, of course, even The Simpsons incorporate this iconic image. And again and again. As silly as these may be, I think it just shows this iconic status of not only Monroe, but Warhol's depiction of Monroe throughout popular culture. Many contemporary artists, of course, take the subject more seriously. And there's a whole generation of artists, particularly contemporary artists who use photography as a medium, that have really utilized Monroe's celebrity persona as a way to express a feminist critique. Zoe Leonard is a contemporary artist whose work explores feminist questions about the power of the male gaze. In this photograph on the left from 1990, Leonard reprises one of Marilyn Monroe's famous poses from the 7-Year Itch, right? When you first look at it, you would have thought it was from that series, but it's made in 1990. But if you notice, she modified the vantage point of this iconic image. You know, we're looking up her skirt, really, but we've also cropped out half of her face. You know, what does that say? So, you know, she forces us to really reconsider our own voyeuristic impulses towards Monroe. Here she is an object, you know, and it's beyond the point of a friendly, fun thing. It really is an object of voyeurism. On the right, she reprises one of the red velvet poses of Marilyn Monroe. At first glance, you see a woman lying seductively on a red cloth, arching her back, the smile, and then you say, wait, you notice this hairy chin, this beard. And it's actually a performance artist who happens to be a bearded lady. So, whoops, don't look yet. And so, you know, but by choosing this model, this bearded lady, to reprise this really famous pose, Leonard simultaneously repeats the codification of the 19th century or the mid-century pinup photograph, but also unhinges us, makes us a little uneasy. We're uneasy about this gaze. We feel uncomfortable. It no longer becomes this object of desire. Another contemporary artist who walks the line between photography and performance art is Japanese artist Yasumasa Morimura. In his work, he creates photographic reconstructions of famous people, paintings, and photographs, placing himself in each photograph as the subject, similar to the style of Cindy Sherman, an artist you may be more familiar with. After tonight's lecture, I hope you kind of recognize what these are referencing. On the left, we see Morimura recreate that Niagara photo that was the source of Warhol's famous Marilyn. And on the right, he photographed himself as Marilyn Monroe in her first Playboy pinup, complete with a wig and fake breasts. His work explores issues of identity, gender, politics, and art history. Other artists continue to appropriate and destroy images of Marilyn, obscuring her image as a way of blotting out her iconography. On the left is a work by John Baldessari called Marilyn Monroe, Partially Erased. Interestingly, though her face is gone, her signature mole remains. As Baldessari said, she never had it removed, so I didn't either. On the right, Parisian street artist Zevs replaces Marilyn's face with a blank space. Viewers can mentally fill in the photo's missing details by memory, due to the image's ubiquity in ads and magazines. By defacing the image, contemporary artists like these challenge our easy acquiescence to the promotion of celebrities as objects of consumption in the media. Another interesting thing is that even some of the original artist photographers are reprising their own work. So Bert Stern, you remember from the last sitting, in 2008, he did a new version with Lindsay Lohan as model. So the two images on the top are Marilyn Monroe from the original 1962 series, and the two on the bottom are Lindsay Lohan in 2008. So I don't even know how many circular references there are in that sort of work. One other thing that was brought to my attention that I thought was fascinating is today, if you notice the date, this is the Christie's catalog from the sale of photographs today in New York that took place at 10 a.m. The auction featured 200 exciting examples of modern and contemporary photography by many preeminent artists. But who was on the cover of the Christie's auction catalog for today's auction? Marilyn Monroe. And a highlight of the auction is this gorgeous portrait of Marilyn from Philip Halsman's famous Life magazine cover shoot, which is offered on behalf of the artist's estate. The auction estimate in the catalog was $70,000 to $90,000. I haven't seen the sales results yet, but the price certainly, and just the fact that her image was selected to be the one on the cover, certainly shows that images of Marilyn continue to be in strong demand as art objects for collectors today. Marilyn Monroe would have been 87 years old today, and even though her life was cut short at the age of 36, her legacy and iconic style lives on. From movies and music to magazines and advertisements, Hollywood still manages to be inspired and influenced by Marilyn's glamorous life and epic beauty, over 50 years since her death. Just flip through any celebrity magazine. Some of-the-moment young starlet or pop singer will be channeling or outright appropriating those platinum locks, the bright red lips, moist and slightly parted, and that joyously, almost defiantly curvy figure, sheathed in something skin-tight and glamorous. Was that Marilyn Monroe on the left on the red carpet at the 2011 Teen Choice Awards? No, it was Taylor Swift wearing the white dress from Just Like Marilyn in the 7-Year Itch. Here we see a handful of other celebrities who are having, their Marilyn moment on the screen. In June, on what would have been Marilyn's birthday, Lady Gaga tweeted, "Happy birthday, Marilyn. They'll never take our blonde hair and lipstick," along with a picture of herself posed Monroe-like. Is that Marilyn Monroe in this Dolce & Gabbana ad? No, it's Scarlett Johansson, again, putting on the all-white blonde hair, ruby lips. It's just amazing. When you start looking for it, you see that advertisement after advertisement is drawing from this same motif. High fashion, covers of Vogue. You look at these poses, the hair, the style. Marilyn continues to be a source of inspiration in the world of high fashion, appearing on the covers of Vogue, on the runways, everywhere. Even the Telfair's getting in on the high fashion act. Have to have a little plug as we're tying in our Marilyn show to our upcoming Art of Great Fashion event, which is on May 5th, by the way. If you haven't got tickets, they're available. We are so thrilled to be collaborating with internationally recognized fashion designer Marc Jacobs to take the event to a whole new level. But we're tying in fashion and Marilyn, and we're sort of complicit in this. We're using her image to sell tickets to our event. So, it just goes on and on. Although, we're doing it for a good cause. The money goes to support our museum and our education programs, so Marilyn would love it. But 50 years after her death, Marilyn's brand shows no signs of slowing down. Yes, she is an enduring, true American icon. The cynical side of me thinks that a big reason for her continued place in pop culture is because there are a lot of people making money off her image. This is particularly true, I think, because in 2010, Marilyn Monroe's estate was purchased, and the estate included, among other things, the rights to merchandise her name and her image. The estate was purchased by Authentic Brands Group, and the company's CEO says he aims to upgrade the Marilyn brand by moving away from cheap souvenirs and developing Marilyn-themed cosmetic lines, spas, sportswear, swimwear, footwear, handbags, and more. Here you see just a small assortment of brand extension I found just on their website. We have a Marilyn Intimates line in the upper corner called Envy, Marilyn Monroe beach towels you can get at Bed Bath & Beyond. Macy's launched the Marilyn Monroe collection. You can get Marilyn Monroe watches. Even sugar. Marilyn Monroe candy, exclusively at It's Sugar. It's amazing. And there are even plans for the inevitable Marilyn Monroe reality TV show, really, in which young women will compete to become the next Hollywood icon. The Authentic Brand Group that bought the estate and the rights to this is also really active on social media to court a new young consumer base for the Marilyn brand. They operate the official Marilyn Monroe Facebook page. You see a snapshot here, which when I looked at it today had over 11.6 million fans. And according to the company, 70% of them are under the age of 24. What's the company's brand vision? According to the promotional materials, it is, quote, to seduce the world with products that capture the iconic personality, style, glamour, and elegance of the legendary actress. Their CEO said in an interview, "Look at what Marilyn was. She's a total fashion icon. She invented the red carpet. She knew her brand. I've got the best model in the world." In fact, perhaps he's right. The Marilyn we celebrate in this exhibition may not really be a person after all. She's a brand, a product, an icon of American consumer culture. Not that different, really, than Coca-Cola. But just what is the secret of Marilyn's enduring appeal? Perhaps it's the malleability of Monroe's image. As the idea of Marilyn travels through decades and cultures, it becomes whatever people need it to be. During World War II, she was just what the war-weary world needed, a perky pinup girl. During the 50s, she brought glamour, and a sense of playfulness to the silver screen, dappled with just the right amount of sexiness to be provocative. After her death, she became a symbol of the globalization of American consumer products through the eyes of pop artists, as well as a symbol of the objectification of women to a second wave of feminists. And today, to her 11.6 million Facebook fans, most of whom have probably never even actually seen a Marilyn film, she is a brand that can be manipulated to sell just about anything. As Monroe herself tellingly said, that's the trouble. A sex symbol becomes a thing. But if I'm going to be a symbol of something, I'd rather it be sex than some of the other things we've got symbols of. I just hate to be a thing. So, in closing, as a final image, rather than the glitz and the glam constructed by Hollywood and corporate marketing departments, I thought it fitting to leave us with a different image of Marilyn. Here is a picture of her behind the camera rather than in front of us. Instead of us gazing at her as an object, let's consider her as a person. Here is a woman who, against all odds, transformed herself from an orphan into a global superstar, a real American success story, a true American icon. And though many have tried and continue to try to emulate her, there will never be another Marilyn Monroe. Thank you very much.